Has been used at Leiden University this semester. So it's very fresh. It's a model on the foundation of public administration theory, trying to avoid to become an enumeration of classical texts. Because that's the tricky thing that happens in most attempts to deal with the foundation of public administration. The course focuses actually on the conceptual idea of public administration. How did it develop? And that's very much embedded as a cultural phenomenon. And the difficulty, we heard before other speakers about it, is the availability of texts coming from Germany, from France, from Italy, from Spain, or whatever. Because I think, especially in the European context, we need to know each other better. So I try to use a framework that might help us to look at the European perspective, as well as put in the local perspective, the national perspectives. So the philosophy of this module is a general framework that can be used by in the different countries, in different settings. Not too fixed on the texts you want to use, but some texts have to be used everywhere, and you can use local text. Mixture of European and local, that's the second point from perspectives. There's also a comparative perspective in there. I think that's very necessary. We need to know each other's languages, how we talk about administrative reality. We need to realize that some languages do not have a term, a concept for public administration at all. Some countries don't have a specific word for policy at all in their language, and that implies that we have different ideas about what public administration is and what values we need to work in. And also for the students, a mixture not only of classes, but also of doing gathering material themselves and presenting it themselves. And finally, the present idea is open-ended. It allows for different ways of ending the course, so not a very fixed format yet. But that's again something that has to be discussed. Do we want joint modules that are very detailed in what everyone is doing, or do we want a more general format that we can change, that can be locally adapted? The latter approach might be preferable to get colleagues enthusiastic to join. So the joint models become really joint models. The objectives is to show the development of the concept of public administration. It's very much a 19th century concept. To create insight in the intricacies of this concept of public administration. How does it link to other ideas we have about society, about state? And also, which I think is fairly important from a European perspective, to indicate the differences between American authors, which are so dominantly present, and European ideas. In the contrast, in the comparison, we learn our own ideas. Point to the diversity in theoretical and practical approaches to public administration. Again, that's important. We cannot leave it at the practical nor at the theoretical level. We have to focus on both. And finally, that's another kind of objective, to help enhance the students' skills in analyzing text, because, to my experience, that's often difficult for them. The contents, how could we approach contents of foundations of our ideas of public administration? First of all, there's the chronological aspects. How did it develop over time? Especially then, I would say, since the 19th century. As a modern concept to denominate some part of social reality we work in, act upon. And secondly, as that is a difficult thing to do often, the chronological aspect, and becomes fairly quickly boring to students, so that's tricky always. So I would say you also use a systematic analytical approach. And that works fairly simple, to be honest. It's a very simple approach. It's also used in a research project. That's to say, first of all, that public administration, and here the distance between screen and projector is a bit too big. Administration is traditionally opposed to politics, and we can point out by reading text, classic text, I would say, and contemporary text, that administration and politics are opposed in all kinds of ways, like facts and values, like power-driven, neutral, goal-rational. You find all kinds of oppositions to denominate this difference in literature. The opposition has been thrown away and again, and has been reintroduced again and again as well. If we want people to understand why this happens, why this is such a fundamental distinction for understanding public administration, we have to focus on that. The same goes for the link of public administration with our public-private distinctions in society. Again, we have a semantic field with very many different notions that derive from legal context, from political science context, from economic context, all different kind of ways to distinguish public and private, and different ways of positioning public administration in this field of ideas. The third level then to focus upon is that public administration is somehow positioned within state and society. Traditional idea is public administration is the working state, and you find all kinds of different ideas authors put forward. So interesting, you find here society versus economy. That's the Weberian opposition, which doesn't match the other ones, but it is semantically you can position it this way. So as you can imagine, in the end, and the previous speaker also told us about making people puzzled, public administration fits in a rather complex field. So one of the aims is to point out that our idea of public administration is a very complex one. It's related to different ideas about public and private, state, society, politics, administration, and we can add other ideas as well. We might also add specific topics on rationality, the idea of rationality in public administration, also a very traditional one. Or in this field, we also would have to discuss the separation of powers as an important notion for the development of our ideas of public administration. So one of the aims of the course would be to, first of all, enhance puzzlement and then try and help people get the skills to deal with them. And this is all only in English, by the way. It becomes much more complex as soon as we enter other languages. The course elements would be classic text. So we might read, for instance, Montesquieu, the traditional text, a bit more than the 6 pages usually used. Add to it a contemporary academic text. You can think, well, there are several authors, and again we have the trouble, do we stick to English and American authors, or are we able to translate other texts? But in this case, you might, for instance, use a text which is fairly classic, between brackets, in the American literature, David Rosenblum's idea about separation of powers in public administration, and confront these texts. Next of all, news items, what's in the news in these decades, you should add this to a course. How is it happening now in practice? Those elements have to be brought in. That can be done by the teacher, or, and I would prefer that myself, have the students look for this and put it in. To make it live to them, the classic text, the classic ideas, the modern debates, and how do they work out in administrative reality. Because we have to link theory and practice. I think that's the main objective of public administration, of the study of public administration. A little bit about the experiences so far. The first test run has been made in Leiden this semester, and I still have to grade the students. So the mix of all the new text worked very well. Students like that. It worked fairly well. It turned out that it's all extremely Western what I'm doing. I have a number of visiting students. They are in fact assistant professors from China, and they came up to me and said, "Why are you bothered with the public-private distinction? Why is that important at all?" So that again pointed out to me that I'm very Western in my way of thinking. Close reading, that's a more tricky thing. Some students are very well able to read the classic text and understand and get to the intricacies. For others it's more difficult. Gathering material for the students, well, they are super adept nowadays, no trouble there. They are very quick in finding text on what's happening now in public administration in different countries, and link that to the topics, which was a very pleasant surprise. Selecting a topic for writing a final paper, I prefer that way for my students, that proved more tricky. For some students, they immediately knew what they wanted to do, and for others it's proved difficult to try and find this big cloud of ideas and concepts and practices to think, what do I want to know? And the final problem, of course, is English, and that will be a problem for any joint module. Some students, it's for me difficult to grade because I cannot understand their English. And that's a problem we really have to deal with joint modules. And the same goes, of course, for translation problems. If you want text to translate them into English, I suppose that's the language we've got to use. That is difficult sometimes. So maybe we should add somewhere in the joint modules some special module, or put it into several modules, the problem of translation, of national differences, and break the taboo of the European Commission on national differences. We should not raise cultural uniques, but we should raise people who are very much aware of national and cultural difference within the European Union and on the globe, I would say. Well, that's where I would like it at the moment. The invitation for me will be this afternoon for people to join and try and help to develop this further. These are very general ideas. There's a lot of work to do. But there are many possibilities to give this different directions as well. And I'm looking for a couple of people who really want to invest in this and try to get this forward and get a module, joint module off the ground.